Hey friends, welcome. If this is your first time visiting, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about mixing epoxy, okay? Now, first of all, depending on the project that you're going to be doing, really makes a difference for your epoxy. So we're going to be talking about epoxy that you can use for like tumblers and stuff like that. Okay, so if your epoxy might be going on a cheese board or a counter or a tumbler or anything of the such, you need to make sure that you're using an epoxy that is FDA compliant to be on or around food. You can, look them up on Google. It will give you all the information on there. I personally like the Pro Marine. I've used a couple different types, but I use Pro Marine. Now, the epoxy, and we're going to talk about the Pro Marine, but most of them come basically the same way, okay? You can get them in different sizes, all right? So this is the gallon jugs, and it makes 2 gallons of epoxy when it's mixed together. So your epoxy comes in part A, that's this one, and then it comes in part B. So part A is your epoxy, part B is your hardener. Now these are 1-to-1. What 1-to-1 means is that you use 1 part of A and 1 part of B. Now with epoxy, in order to get a good project, the most important thing is your mixing, your measuring and your mixing. All right, now since I use such big containers of epoxy, I've done different things. I've put pumps on them. I've done different bottles. I had some pumps that I really liked, and since then I haven't been able to find them again, and I haven't really been able to find ones that I like that measure out completely and don't leak. So I have since gone to these. I got these on Amazon, and so far as squirt bottles go, these are my favorite. The one thing I can tell you though is you got to be careful because it's easy to squirt too much out of them, but the nice thing is they don't leak and they're very self-contained. I've had no mess since I've been using these, so that's good. Now if you're going to put them in containers like this, make sure that you mark them. So I've got this as part A and this is part B. I marked one upside down, as you can, if you can see. So all right, so when you're mixing your epoxy, you're going to need 2 containers to measure it in. Now, if you're using more than like what your containers that you're going to measure it in together would fill, then you would need something bigger to put it in. All right. So you're going to put in your part A and your part B. It doesn't matter which one you do first because they're going to be in separate containers. But you do need to make sure that they're even. So once you start measuring, I like to get down eye level and look at them from the side to make sure that I am even. Because sometimes looking at it up top, you can't really tell. All right, so you're going to pour your epoxy and you're going to pour it evenly. All right, so you need equal parts part A, equal parts part B. Now, the way that you're going to get the best results is what I'm going to show you here, the first part. But if these were both full and you needed to pour it in here, that's okay because you're still going to get good results. But what your epoxy will tell you and always read your directions, is that you pour one into the other, and I'm barely going to have enough room. And then you mix it. Now, when you're mixing your epoxy, slow, wide mixes, if you mix it too fast, all you're going to do is create more air bubbles. So then, once you've got that mixed around a little bit, then you go back and you pour it both back into the other container. And then you mix. Now, when it comes to mixing epoxy, you have a lot of options. You can either just mix it like this, and just take your time and mix it, but you need to mix it long enough. So the problem is, so many people just mix it and say, okay, that looks good. You have to actually mix it for 4 minutes. All right. So if you're going to do this, you have to truly mix it for 4 minutes. Now, yeah, you might get epoxy that works, but you're not going to get your best quality if you don't mix it correctly. Mixing it correctly is key. Now, you have other options. So I'm going to pour this into here. Now, if you're going to reuse these, just let them, once they get hard, you'll be able to just pull up the stuff inside of them. All right, so you can also put this on, use an epoxy mixer. So this epoxy mixer I got from Hobby Lobby. And you can only mix so much at a time with it. So it just goes in here. This little metal piece goes in here, and you turn it on. And it mixes. So we're going to put this to the side and let that mix. But I want to show you, you can also, so if you're using bigger, if you're using larger amounts of epoxy, these are the ones that I like. So this is the brand, and I get them on Amazon. Now this comes with 2 in a pack. So if I'm doing if I have a larger bowl of epoxy because I'm doing something big, then I use these. So this is an epoxy mixing blade. So this comes off, and you put this on the end of your drill. And then if you have larger things of epoxy, you can put this down in it, and you're going to have to hold your drill, and you still need to mix for 4 minutes, but this will help you to mix larger quantities of epoxy much more efficiently. Okay? And then, when you're done using it, I use a baby wipe and I wipe it off immediately. Same with the epoxy mixer, the little metal piece that's in there, I use a baby wipe it off immediately, and wipe off anything around it. Okay, so but this is really good for if you're mixing larger amounts. And even larger amounts, you're still going to be 50-50, and the difference is just going to be what type of containers you use to measure it out in. All right, so your epoxy is so important that you mix it correctly. You need to measure and mix correctly or you're not going to get a good finish. So when your epoxy comes out and it's still like soft, it doesn't harden up, it could either be your temperature where you're mixing your epoxy and doing your epoxy if it's too cold, but usually it's because you did not mix your epoxy well or you got water in your epoxy. So the other thing with epoxy does not like water. Now if you're going to use a baby wipe on something, you want to just wipe the edge that you don't want epoxy on. You can use a couple different things to get the air bubbles out of your epoxy. However, I will tell you, your best bet to have a nice, good epoxy mix is going to be a good slow mixing. So this does perfect. Or even if you're hand mixing, a slow, steady mix for 4 minutes, and that's where you get the least amount of bubbles. Now you may still have a few bubbles. You can take heat to your epoxy project. The other thing you can do is you can do a little spritz of alcohol on top of it. If you're using alcohol, it needs to be greater than 90%. Alcohol that has too much of a water content is going to mess up your epoxy. So a 90% or higher for your alcohol, and you can spritz it, and it will actually, if you're doing a mold, help get rid of bubbles. Honestly, epoxy is very simple to mix, very simple to use. It's just a matter of mixing it correctly and mixing it for the right amount of time. And that's it. It's honestly that easy. And then you can mix different things inside your epoxy. You can put glitter in your epoxy. You can put alcohol inks in your epoxy. You can put acrylic paint in your epoxy. You can put mica powder in your epoxy. Now, alcohol inks, little goes a long way. Acrylic paint, a little goes a long way. If you put too much acrylic paint, your epoxy is going to be gummy. If you're putting glitter in your epoxy, I like a 1-to-1 ratio. So, or not a 1-to-1, a half as much glitter as you have epoxy. All right. Well, listen, I hope that you guys have a blessed and beautiful day. I hope this was helpful. And to my subby friend that asked for this video, please let me know if you have any other questions. And I hope you guys have a blessed and beautiful day. Thank you, friends. I'll see you later. Bye.